You know the feeling. You're about to lose it if one more thing happens, and then ding! Meltdown. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Erin Patterson with the ADHD Queens podcast. And today we're talking about meltdowns. So, what is a meltdown? That's the term I prefer to use for big feelings really fast. And it is very common with ADHD folks. There's lots of different ways to describe it. When it happens to children, we sometimes call it a tantrum. Now, non-ADHD kids can also have tantrums, of course, but an ADHD meltdown is different. And part of the problem comes in because we have trouble regulating our emotional system. So we get offended by something, or we feel criticized by something, or we're overstimulated and overwhelmed, and it's just building, building, building. And then all of this energy and emotional dysregulation has to come out all at one time. So then there it is. Meltdown mode is kind of how I phrase it. And a lot of people mistake it for like a bipolar episode of irritability or something like that, because somebody can go from being pretty chill on the outside to, there was a cartoon way back when called the Animaniacs, and they had one of their characters on it was Katie Kaboom, and she always would do things totally normal. She was a teenager, and then all of a sudden, she blew up the house with her, crazy explosiveness, and it was her emotional explosivity. And at the time I watched that and I was like, oh yeah, that's what being a teenager is like. But now I look back on it and I wonder, did poor Katie Kaboom have undiagnosed ADHD? And she was just having meltdowns because that's kind of what happens. Interesting. We should maybe look into her diagnostic profile. Anyway, on we go. The symptoms of an ADHD meltdown can range from mild to more severe and intense. So we're going to use these as like yellow, orange, red symptoms. So, okay. It could start from general irritability, just feeling a little bit frustrated, a little bit irritated, maybe some grunting or, hand clenching. And maybe that's triggered by, even this morning, what was I trying to find? I was trying to find something in my bag and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, it's low frustration tolerance. So the longer something takes for us to accomplish, the more likely we are going to get frustrated and either quit the thing or scream about the thing. I like to say that sometimes I have an attention span of about 4 seconds. And so if I can't figure it out in 4 seconds, I'm going to get pretty frustrated. That would be, I can't figure out how to set the clock on the stove or whatever. And then I'm, just feeling irritated and just say, F it, I'm not doing it. So it can start, down here in the yellow range of I'm just irritated. It's a little brief explosion of frustration. Maybe you're snapping at people or being very short with people, those kinds of things. And then it kind of can escalate. I think other versions of the mild meltdown can be what some people call the Irish goodbye, where you're hanging out with people and being social, and then all of a sudden you have had enough and you've got to go, and you just leave. And people be like, "Oh, where did they go? They were just here." Well, they left without saying goodbye to anybody. So that's another kind of common expression of what would be meltdown. I've even seen some professionals say that binge eating could be a version of meltdown. I haven't looked into that much. I don't know how I feel about that, but that seems to me to be more of a way of emotionally regulating, maybe using comfort food or seeking dopamine through like carb loading, eating all of the carbs or the sugar sort of thing. So I don't know that I would particularly count that as part of a meltdown. So then we're going to look at what are orange level meltdown symptoms. That might be the things that start to look more like anxiety presentations. So crying, like an emotional breakdown where maybe you're having trouble. Maybe hit the mic. Maybe an emotional breakdown where you're having trouble breathing. Maybe you're sweating, or maybe you're breathing faster. So those can kind of be the mid-level, and a lot of times those look like anxiety attacks. And I have people actually say, I had an anxiety attack, but then when we look at what triggered it, what was happening beforehand, those sorts of things, we're able to actually say, this might have been an overstimulation situation. This might have been a situation where it was actually a meltdown and not an anxiety attack. So that's something to think about too. Then we have red level sorts of meltdowns. And that's when, after one of those, you kind of have to go on an apology tour and tell everybody, I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry you had to see that. Those sorts of things. That might be where the swearing comes in, the screaming, the yelling, the slamming doors, throwing things, breaking things, Hopefully we're not punching people and those sorts of things. I meant to mention earlier, so you're not distracted. Yes, I did get a new tattoo. You're probably paying attention to it a little bit, but yes, it's there. There will be more to come. So don't hit the mic and don't be distracted. There's new ink. Years ago, I read a book called Asperger's Syndrome and Anxiety, A Guide to Successful Stress Management, written by Nick Dublin. And he writes a whole chapter 7, about meltdowns. And I just love his analogy that he uses in there. So I am going to quote this directly from his book for you and talk about that. He says, I look at meltdowns as being somewhat analogous to the physiological reaction of having to vomit. Vomiting is neither a good nor a bad thing. It's something that just happens, and it usually serves a good purpose, which is to rid yourself of harmful contaminants in your stomach. But you would never want to vomit in public, would you? The first thing you do when you begin to get that nauseous feeling is head to the nearest sink or toilet to avoid any embarrassment or mess. It's not something you want to do in front of other people. Meltdowns are quite similar. And I loved that imagery. Not that we want to imagine people vomiting. Sorry if you're sensitive to that. But it's important to understand that when we think about somebody vomiting, we have compassion for them. Oh my gosh, are you okay? That doesn't feel good. I know it's, not something anybody wants to do, but meltdowns can be very similar. I can't help that I want to choke the shit out of this water bottle because I'm so mad right now. And it's going to be better for me if I just go ahead and do it and get it over with than trying to what did we talk about last time? Masking. Cover it up, push it down, keep it down. That's not going to work because, like I said before, eventually you're just going to lose it. Meltdowns can actually serve a purpose. And the first one of those is that you're releasing physical and mental tension from your body. And that's important. We do a lot of things throughout the day and it builds up tension. It'd be great if we could take a deep breath and regulate, and sometimes that does work, but then sometimes you just need to have the meltdown. And as long as the meltdowns don't go on and on and on, as long as they're not too long, they can actually kind of help restore your psychological equilibrium. So the meltdown should be cathartic and get all of it out. And if you allow yourself time to purge this tension and all the anxiety that builds up in you, which results because we are dealing with all of this, unknown and unpredictable situations that happen throughout the day. It just builds up. And so, if you allow yourself to feel that, purge the tension, then you can actually feel restored afterwards. Let's talk a little bit about What contributes to meltdowns? So, all of the symptoms of ADHD can compile and result in just not handling situations very effectively. You have to think, we've got sensory overload, too many sounds, too many people, too many things happening in the environment around us. And because the ADHD brain has difficulty prioritizing the information that comes in, we get overstimulated very easily. And that overstimulation can often lead to a meltdown, especially if you're not aware of what's causing you to feel all of those things. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. But if you start to pay attention to that kind of temperature rising and the amount of tension in your body and that feeling of, I need to get out of here, you can start to maybe manage those and not end up having meltdowns in public. Other things that can contribute to meltdowns are frustration with task demands, which would be whatever we're working on and the difficulty level, or something's not working like it's supposed to. Technology a lot of times will contribute to a meltdown because it just, it's great when it works, but when it doesn't work, we want to throw it out the window, I mentioned earlier that we can become emotionally dysregulated when somebody criticizes us or makes us feel judged or like we didn't do something right. That's a lot of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's a very intense emotional reaction to being criticized and feeling rejection, even if rejection wasn't actually what was happening in the situation. So just any kind of emotional dysregulation can result in a meltdown, whether it's, yellow level or red level. Also, transitions and changes, because we don't do so great with moving from one task to another. And so that can be a big part of what makes us feel overstimulated and then therefore ends up in volcanic explosion mode. And then sleep deprivation and hunger, like biological things, can contribute to that, getting to that point where you're just blowing up about stuff. So it's important for us to be rested, and for God's sakes, carry a snack around with you, because hangry people, even without ADHD, are not pleasant. So now we kind of know what meltdowns are and what causes them and contributes to them, but how are we supposed to manage them? So I have a rule in my house that I try to teach to everybody when we're talking about meltdowns, because I can't help the meltdown. And I have learned over the years that trying to do anything to help me when I am in that headspace, it's just not going to work. I am not operating in a space that I am able to take feedback or, and when has telling somebody to calm down ever actually helped them calm down? I don't know that it has. So that would be one tip. Don't tell people to calm down when they're in the middle of meltdown mode. But I remember when my husband and I first started dating, we maybe had been dating for a month, and my dad said, well, we'll see how long you're together. Wait till she has one of her little meltdowns. And I wasn't even aware that I had meltdowns, so I had no idea what he was talking about. And then it wasn't long, and I had a meltdown. So we have perfected, or, well, not perfected, but we have definitely improved my husband's ability to deal with me in a meltdown over the course of 2 decades together. And so we've got it down to almost an art. The rule is no sudden movements, keep a neutral face, and don't try to help. Similar to approaching a wild animal in distress. But it works for us. And, so I have also learned that because he's not going to try to help anything while I am dysregulated, I can let out whatever needs to come out, and then I can excuse myself to go regulate a little bit better. So, several weeks ago, something happened, and I was just so mad that I had a water bottle in my hand and I just squeezed it, and then I threw it across the room. So, nothing hurt. The water didn't go everywhere, but I felt much better afterwards. And he took a beat and said, "You feel better?" And I said, "Yes." And then we moved on with our life. Whereas, I don't know, 12 years ago, he would have been like, "I don't know what you're so upset about." And I'd be like, "Me neither." And it just gets worse and worse. I probably should have backed away from the mic from that. Sorry. If you remember what the author Nick Dublin said about vomiting, keep in mind, if you are the person witnessing a meltdown, to be patient. The ADHD brain cannot help this, and it will probably help the day move along if you just let this come out. If you are the person experiencing the meltdown, I also need you to be patient with yourself and remind yourself that my brain just does this sometimes. If you feel it building up, you can excuse yourself, go to a different room, scream in a pillow. You can scream in the car while you're driving. Just don't close your eyes. That's not very safe. But we can relieve or release this pressure by doing some of these things. We just have to start paying attention to our body when it's telling us you're getting dysregulated, you're getting overstimulated, you're getting overwhelmed. Also, have you taken your medicine? Because if your medicine is out of your system, you're going to be more prone to overstimulation, low frustration tolerance, and all of the things that contribute to meltdown. So that's important to think about also. That's how we manage them when they're happening, but how do we prevent them from coming? Well, you need to hear the truth, and I say this with love. If you have ADHD, you are going to have meltdowns for your life. Okay? Your whole entire life. It's going to happen. But you can learn to mitigate some of them, do them so that they don't last as long. It's just a brief and then you feel better. But you also can prevent some of the things that contribute to those meltdowns. Ow! Ruby! Honey. Come here. Can you tell everybody hello? Can you say hi? Hold on. Oh, hold on. They love to see you. They love to see you. Say hi. Okay, please don't bite my foot again. Preventing meltdowns. Okay, know your triggers. Pay attention to what are the things that are causing you to get to meltdown mode. For some people, it's traffic. Well, you can't always navigate life without traffic, but you could, go the back way instead of getting on the interstate if it's a certain time of day. You could choose a different restaurant to go to if this particular location is going to be more likely to have traffic. You can also know triggers like in the environment that may happen, like if this particular restaurant is super busy or there's too many people there, you're going to tend to get more overstimulated. So maybe we don't go to that restaurant except on Tuesdays when nobody else is there. Pay no attention to the shaking camera angle. It's just a Ruby alert. Ruby, lay down. You also need to think about setting up hacks for things that are going to contribute to meltdown mode or get you triggered into that. Oh, she just said it's hard to tell if you have ADHD or if you're having a stroke sometimes. Oh, that feels great. Now we're going to go into our famous section, Q&A. The question is, how am I supposed to prevent meltdowns from happening? Great question. If you have a tendency to misplace items like keys, wallets, phones, which is very common ADHD symptom. You can put trackers on these items. So I remember one day I was carrying a load of laundry from the house to the car. Before I had a laundry room, I had to take my obviously dirty clothes to the laundromat to launder them. And one day I'm taking a basket of dirty clothes out to the car. My keys are in my hand, and I get the basket, down to the car and drop the keys somewhere between the front door and the car, which really is only about maybe 30 feet. And I'm digging through the dirty clothes and looking at on the ground, and I went back in the house trying to find I knew I left the house with the keys, but I couldn't find them. They were nowhere. And I'm telling you, 20 minutes of crying, like, what is wrong with me? I know I had these keys. My poor husband gets text messages. I'm in the middle of a meltdown, just like screaming into the phone, sending all these messages, and they were in the laundry basket the whole time. So this was not an uncommon thing for me, losing phones, debit cards, wallet, keys. And so I bought little trackers. The ones that I use are called tiles, and they attach to your keys. So ta-da, it's a little piece that goes onto your keys, but you press the button and it locates my phone. Press the button, find the phone. Find the phone, you can find your wallet. Or if you have your phone and you can't find your keys or your wallet, then you can, as long as you have one, you can find the other ones that are in the system here. And so that has saved so many meltdowns for me. Also, if you've got a smartwatch that's connected to your phone, you can ding it from your watch. So, right. So technology, that's a hack that has helped us with losing things. And so doing things like that, noting, okay, this is happening to me often. How can I come up with a hack so that I can prevent this from being a meltdown in the future? So the more hacks that we develop, the more, ways of navigating the system more effectively, the less meltdowns we're going to have. Also, we have to take into account how our sensory processing impacts meltdowns. And so I recommend to everybody, if lights are part of what triggers you, get some sunglasses, some really cool sunglasses that you can wear inside. But yeah, you can be whatever you want to be, right? We're not trying to impress anybody. If I want to wear my sunglasses inside because these fluorescent lights are too bright and I hate them all, I can do that. And if somebody says, you're really rude to have your sunglasses on, you can say, okay, well, I have sensory issues with the lights and I'm going to keep them on so I don't be an asshole to you. How about that? Having fidget toys, something to keep your, body moving a little bit, being able to, stand up and walk around. If you're at a presentation or something where you have to stay seated, it can be helpful if you stand at the back of the room and kind of move back and forth instead of forcing yourself to be in one position. Also, having headphones or earplugs. I use the loop earplugs. There's also a brand called Eargasm. This lets you have sound still coming in, but it blocks out some of the peripheral sound. And so that can be helpful. And smells. Smells can also trigger that. So maybe you don't go to places that have certain smells because you'll, in short, know your triggers, develop some hacks, use your sensory items to block out all of the extra stuff, and cut yourself some slack because meltdowns are going to happen and we just have to figure out how do we navigate them a little more effectively so we're not vomiting all over the people we love with our explosive emotions. They really don't like that. So it's our responsibility to figure out how can I make this better. It's not going to go away, but it can be better. Next time on episode 4, it's all about the mids. All right. Everybody, that's it for our Meltdown episode. Thanks for watching. All right. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of the things. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And remember, we might have ADHD, but we're queens with ADHD. Non-queens welcome too. See you next time.